Hi everyone, it's Emma at Little Silver Hedgehog. I'll just wait for a few more of you to join me, but fingers crossed I am on the 4G, so hopefully that will hold out as we go around the garden. So this is one of many events I've been running recently. I'm in the hallway at the moment, which will become apparent. We will go into the Hedgehog Hospital, but it's all dark in there and I don't want to surprise the hedgehogs. So we're going to wait here for people to join us before we make our way into the hospital. So please comment, let me know you're here. Lots of people saying hello. Good evening, everyone. Gosh, we've got about 78 people, which is amazing. Everyone's hoping I'm doing okay. I have had some really sad news. I just had to take 5 minutes. I went into the hospital earlier just to check on the new arrival that's in the incubator, and she'd passed away already, so I'm gutted. I hardly had any time to try and save her. Obviously I'm hopeful with each one that I can do my best and save them, but sadly it wasn't possible, so it's a little bit of a sad start to our tour, but I will try and be positive as always. So I'm waiting here in my hallway. A few hedgehog things. I've got a hedgehog keyring over here. You probably couldn't see that actually. I'll have to turn you around in a bit. But what we're going to do this evening is we're going to do a little tour into the hospital. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that I do, some of the patients that we've got in care at the moment. As I say, it will be dark in there because the hedgehogs are nocturnal, so it keeps as close to their natural environment as possible. Give you a little tour in there, and then we'll head out into the garden and see what we can see. We should definitely be able to see some stuff in the pond, but I'm not sure whether we'll see any hedgehogs. I've realised it's actually still quite light out there, so we'll have to see who's out there already. Loads of people saying hello from South Africa and all sorts, lots of people I recognise, lots of new followers as well. So I'm sure many of you have been on the hospital tour before, but for those of you who haven't, I've been running Little Silver Hedgehog Rescue for about 8 years now, and I take in sick and injured hedgehogs with the aim of getting them back to the wild. So they come in with all sorts of things, with injuries, with parasites at this time of year, starting to get a lot of orphans coming in as well. So lots and lots of different things that need treating. But what I'll do now is I'll turn you around and we'll go out. I'm literally going to show you by torchlight, so hopefully you can still see, but I'm going to turn you around here. Please comment, let me know any questions. I'll try my best to answer them as we go around. If I can't answer them, if I don't get a chance now, then I'll come back to the video later and have a look and answer all your questions. And as always, if you want to support the work I do, loads of different ways. Some of them don't even cost you anything. If you have a look at littlesilverhedgehog.com, there's a link, support and donate, all sorts of things that you can do to help. It's all self-funded, so when you have a look around the facilities, yeah, just remember that anybody who does this kind of stuff doesn't get any money to do it. So I'm going to turn you around and we shall head out into the hospital. So basically the hospital is my attached garage. So it's attached to the house, which is brilliant. So I don't have to go outside in the pouring rain, or in the middle of winter I don't have to go traipsing through in the snow or anything. So it's divided. We've got 2 doors, so we've gone through the first one, and then we're going to go through this second one into the hospital. So as I say, we'll show you by torchlight what's going on in here. So here we go. It's very dark. But the hedgehogs, obviously, they don't have brilliant eyesight, but they do have wonderful hearing and their sense of smell as well. So although they might not be able to see me, they will definitely hear me coming. So we'll go over and see if there's anybody about. I can hear somebody. Oh, we've just missed him. There was George. I'll give you a little peek of George. Here's George's leg. Can you see George's leg? He's just going back into bed. Now, this is something interesting. You see how George has got his leg out behind him? That's quite normal. Hedgehogs actually run with their legs slightly out behind them, and I get lots of people contacting me saying that they found a hedgehog with a broken leg, but actually all they're seeing is a hedgehog running with his leg slightly out behind them. So it's worth having a look there. When you see his leg, you think, oh my goodness, what's going on there? I'll try and move the torch away so you can see him. but that's completely normal. So we've got all the hedgehogs here. They have their own little nest box. They're all on heat pads. Can you see the wire that's coming out of the bottom down there? So they're all on heat pads to maintain their temperature, and they've all got lots of food and water in there. So George, he came in, he was found at night, but he was losing a lot of spines, so he came in for treatment and since been found to have lungworm. He's been treated for that, and he's also been treated for fluke, which is a flatworm that lives in the intestines. And each hedgehog, you can see, has a record card, and on the front I'll be recording what date the hedgehog came in, any observations, so found out in the day, was it wobbly, was it found in a street, was it found in a park, any obvious signs of injury or wounds or anything like that. And I'll also every day be recording what weight they are, what treatment, so each hedgehog is on a different regime of medications, so each one has to make sure they'll all be on different regimes, different medications every day, so I have to keep track of everything. So each one will have its own record card. Up here, I don't think anyone's out yet. This is Fred. So this is Fred's record card. Can you see that on there? It's always difficult with a torch because you'll get the reflection. So Fred has been in here. He had an injury on his head that was infected. He'd probably been fighting with another hedgehog, we think. He's come in from a garden where there's lots of activity between the males, really boisterous, and I'm seeing this more and more actually in the last couple of years. Didn't think that hedgehogs would injure each other. That was quite a rare occurrence, but actually seeing them really fighting and grabbing each other. So we think that his injuries are probably caused by fighting with another hedgehog. And then whilst he was here, sadly, Fred got what we call coccidiosis, which is a protozoan infection. Chickens get it, humans can get it as well, but he picked that up from another hedgehog. It spreads really easily. So he picked that up probably from Penny, who's next door, and previously when they were out at foster care they were near each other, and we think they've basically just picked up the infection. He's picked up the infection from her. So his injury is now healed. He's been treated for the coccidiosis, and so he's ready. Tomorrow he will go back to foster care and he's ready for release very soon. Then in here again, I thought we'd see something, but Penny, she's asleep, but when we come back in from the garden we'll see if there's any more activity. So this is Penny. And again, Penny came in, she has got a little wound on her side that had got infected and quite a lot of spine loss. And then, to say, when she was in rescue, she picked up coccidiosis. So she's receiving the treatment for her wound, and she's also receiving the treatment for the coccidiosis as well. But she's pretty much healed, and she will be back to the wild again tomorrow. She's being collected. So we've got quite a few that are almost finished their journey back to recovery. A lot of people saying they've got the same blanket. These are really cute, aren't they? So I love these pattern blankets. The really thick ones, I try and use a white blanket, and the reason for that is that anything like blood, or if they've got very dodgy poo, like green poo is normally a bad sign. I can more easily see that, but these guys are all pretty much on the road back to recovery, so it doesn't really matter what colour their blankets are. Then down here we have the new arrival, Lilac. Some of you will have followed her story. She arrived with breathing difficulties a couple of days ago. Luckily, I'll put you right close, but I can't hear too much from her. Can you hear a little rumble? You might be able to hear. She's being treated for lungworm, and also she's on an antibiotic because we think she might be starting to get pneumonia. So she's receiving those two, but if you have a look at the back, don't know if you can see at the back of her hutch, her poo is very nice. So she's not incredibly sick, but she does have a breathing problem. I'm always wary at this time of year. She is a reasonable sized hedgehog and she's female. And right now, lots of female hedgehogs are nesting. And so there's always the terrible risk at this time of year that a hedgehog that's poorly, I may have, by bringing her in, separated her from her babies. And that's absolutely heartbreaking. But unfortunately, if mum is poorly, she would be no good to those babies. So it is the right thing to do to bring her into the rescue. But I'm always very careful to try and check out the history and to try and assess exactly what a hedgehog was doing when it was out in the day, find out whether it's a female and what size. I've had a couple that have come in the past week that I've assessed, and actually it's turned out that they are probably about to give birth or have just given birth, and they've been able to be released. But I'd always say a hedgehog out in the day, it's never normal. 99% of the time there will be a major problem, and I'd rather check a hedgehog and be able to tell you, oh, I think it's okay. It's one of the very rare times when it's okay. I'd rather check that than miss a hedgehog that's really sick. Because if I tell you, oh, a hedgehog has to be this size, or if it's doing this, it's okay, most people don't know enough about hedgehogs to be able to know what a good size is. I've had people tell me that they found an adult hedgehog and it turned out to be a tiny baby, because most people haven't seen hedgehogs close up, so they have no idea how big or small they should be. So these are the guys in rescue at the moment. I'll also show you the new boy that arrived earlier. Some of you will have already seen his update. So he's in this one. He's under a chick brooder at the moment, and this is the guy that some of you may have seen. He's got the really nasty abscess on his rear, so he's received pain relief and antibiotics tonight, but we think it's probably going to be a vet trip for this hedgehog tomorrow because the abscess is so substantial. So he's under this chick brooder, which keeps him nice and warm. A few people asking questions, is there a set breeding time? Well, normally hedgehogs, I say normally because normal is changing, but normally hedgehogs would begin waking up around April, so they would start breeding, start waking up and mating around kind of very late April through May, and babies would be born June, July, August time. But this year, and actually last year, if you have a think, we've had much warmer springs. So last year in February, hedgehogs were waking up, so almost 2 months earlier than normal, and the same this year. They've been waking up a lot earlier, so that means that they've been breeding much earlier, and babies are being born much earlier. So there's lots of, as I say, hoglets, disturbed nests already. Other rescues are seeing those being brought in, so they have been breeding much earlier this year. And when I say normal, well, the way that the climate is changing and that we're getting much milder winters, there is evidence that hedgehogs are mating right late into the season. They will normally have 2 litters anyway, so they'll have one around this time of year into the summer, and then they normally have a second lot around September time, and those are the ones that normally struggle to get up to weight for winter. But in some places there is some suggestion that they're breeding all the way through the winter. So some of the ones that were coming into the rescue in, say, March time, I think might have been born even November time, possibly even right across the winter. So things do change, but it's really important at this time of year particularly to be really careful to avoid disturbing mums and babies. I say I've had quite a few calls over the weekend, people who've been doing gardening or removing sheds, and they've completely accidentally disturbed a mum with her hoglets. Sometimes those hoglets can only be a few hours old. If mum runs off, or she might stay with the babies but she may eat them, that's just what happens in nature. So it's best to avoid disturbing in the first place, and we'll talk a bit about that as we go around the garden. Someone's asking about the length of pregnancy. I think it's about 30 days. So yes, I say if they woke up this year around March time, so they'll have been mating through April, so babies will be being born now. So I say plenty of evidence that they're being born now, certainly in York, and I imagine elsewhere. So those are the hogs that are in care. Say we do have the incubator, but sadly I lost the girl that came in earlier, the one that was wobbly. Unfortunately, by the time a hedgehog is wobbly, it means they're incredibly dehydrated, hypothermic, and unfortunately the organs have normally already started shutting down. So it's always really important, if you find a hedgehog out in the day, to find help as soon as possible. But particularly if that hedgehog is wobbly, is collapsed, it's absolutely critical that you get help as soon as possible. And unfortunately, often it is too late to save them, but as quickly as you can find help, and sometimes if you can't get hold of a rescue, if you can get hold of a vet that might be able to give emergency fluids, that can be the next best thing as well. Lynn saying hello. She's probably checking up on the 3 just to make sure they're all ready for tomorrow, which is brilliant. For those of you that haven't seen before, I'll just show you some of the facilities here in the hospital. So we have the incubator here, and then I literally this morning ordered a second incubator. If you have a look at this, amazing. So this is a Brintsey incubator. I've got a TLC 40 Advance. You could fit a whole family of hoglets in there, or one large hedgehog. This is £550 worth of incubator, so it's not cheap at all. You can get even bigger ones that will take foxes and all sorts, but this is a good size for an adult hedgehog, and I can control the temperature and humidity and everything in there. And it means that a hedgehog coming in, as I say, out in the day, normally hypothermic, so important to get them warmed as soon as possible to give them the best chance. Can't do anything with them until they're warmed up, so incubators really are lifesavers, and I literally just placed my order this morning for one that will go here, so I'll have 2 intensive care units, which will be amazing. And someone's saying that they've taken hedgehogs to the vets, and they've put them to sleep. Vets do vary in their knowledge about hedgehogs, but they do have a responsibility to treat wildlife. Some vets are better than others, but often if you chat to a rescue, even if they don't have spaces, they will often tell you which are the best vets in the area that they would advise. There's lots of good vets in York, for example, that I know would do well. And sometimes a rescue can't do everything. So, for example, things like broken legs and some really bad abscesses, a hedgehog would need to be gassed. So that's basically just knocked out so that it can be treated in a pain-free way, and also x-rays and things I can't do. So there are some things that we have to go to the vet for. So I will have 2 incubators here, which will be amazing. Then my different sets of hutches, and all these hutches as well. These are waiting for patients. I shouldn't speak too soon, should I? Because they'll be full within the next couple of days. And for those of you who haven't seen, I use a cage for cleaning out, making sure that they're secure in there. I've got my little medicine cabinet, so that's all my drugs and all sorts. This would normally be locked for when people are coming around, but that's all my drug treatments in there, all sorts of things, all on prescription only, those, so they have to be kept safely in there. All sorts of treatments. We've got skin care, wound care, we've got disinfectant for the incubator, saline pods, these are for giving fluid injections for poorly hedgehogs, all sorts of treatments, supplements for various things, for example if they're losing their spines, lots of different disinfectants here, tea tree cream for this treating mild cases of ringworm. There's all sorts of different treatments here, all sorts of lotions and potions and various things. Someone's saying, how do you fund all of this? Now that's the challenge. There is no money basically for people who do wildlife rescue. It's all self-funded, or money that people can raise from obviously people like yourselves, kind donations. And the hedgehog drugs, asking about how they're administered. Most of the drugs I use, they are tiny little amounts of sheep and cattle wormers, horse wormers sometimes. Most of them are administered by injection, so you have to have been shown how to do that, and then know obviously the doses for hedgehogs. So it's not really something that you can just kind of get into and take lightly. There's all sorts of training and so on that you need to be able to do the level of care. So these are all fluid pods, syringes, wound treatments. These are all some of my record cards, more syringes, my sharps bin. So obviously I'm using needles all the time for the injections, and also if you, when I say giving fluids, that basically means I'm injecting fluids into the cavity between the hedgehog's spines and its bony structure. And those, obviously all the needles have to be disposed of carefully. So I've got a sharps bin that will then get taken to the vets for disposal. All sorts of hedgehog food. Now we'll talk a little bit about food while we're looking at this. So people often ask me what to feed the hedgehogs, and I would say simply any cat or kitten biscuit, or you can use a specialist hedgehog food. So I won the competition from Brambles a few weeks ago. So this is Brambles hedgehog food, so it's a dry biscuit. There's also Spikes, a crunchy one, and Spikes Moist that I use. The main kitten biscuit I use is a Royal Canine baby cat, which comes in huge sacks, and I've never found a hedgehog that doesn't like it, so I feed a lot of that. In terms of any meaty cat or dog food, anything at all, any flavour, pretty much everything contains fish. There's no problem with fish, and hedgehogs, they just don't always like the fish flavours, but I personally use Pedigree Chum Loaf Original, and this is for baby hedgehogs that will be coming in, and sick hedgehogs. This is a puppy moose, and it's just really nice and moist, very easily palatable. So I have these stocks are in ready for when baby hedgehogs come in, and also lots of critical care. I use this. It's basically like a rehydration fluid for sick hedgehogs that come in. Then more syringes and all sorts down there, more different types of food. And then we'll look, lots of you have seen this area before, but when a hedgehog comes in and is initially admitted, a hedgehog will come into this area. Someone's saying, in terms of the questions we've asked above, how do we get the answers? Well, I will try as I talk to answer your questions, but if I don't spot your question, I will check back. This video will basically stay on my Facebook page forever, so I will go back and try and respond to as many as I can, so I'll literally type back the comments if I don't answer that. So I'll tell you what I think you might need to know or want to know. Someone was also asking about fundraising and my jewellery. Yes, I do make silver jewellery that raises funds for the rescue, so please do check that out. All the links on littlesilverhedgehog.com. So this is the sterile area where the hedgehogs come into. Someone asking about thinking fish gives hedgehogs loose poo. No, it's a myth. There's a myth that you can't feed hedgehogs fish flavours and gravy. You can feed them any kind of meaty cat or dog food. Every cat or dog food contains fish derivatives. It's in everything. There's absolutely no problem at all with fish. They just won't probably like the fish flavour. So if you were to put out Pedigree Chum Loaf Original and you were to put out salmon flavoured kitty cat, they would probably go for the Pedigree Chum. It's more of what they like, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. That said, this time of year, obviously, it's really hot at the moment, really dry and hot. Personally, I don't put wet food out in the garden because there's the risk of flies. It doesn't keep very long in this hot weather. I only ever put out a kitten biscuit for the hedgehogs outside, and that's fine as long as you're leaving out plenty of shallow bowls of water as well. And you'll probably be aware in your areas, there's a huge drought at the moment, and a lot of these hedgehogs that are coming in, their problems are exacerbated by the fact that they can't get enough water. So hedgehogs will come into this area for assessment. We've got all sorts of things out here, scales, so every hedgehog will be weighed, and that's the way I can know if they're doing okay. They should be putting weight on every day. Lots of bowls. This is a fluid sac, so you've probably seen these. It's a bit like humans when you're wired up to a drip. So I will be putting my needle and syringe into there, drawing the fluids out, filling those up, and then I will be injecting the hedgehogs once they've been warmed up. I say that's not something that the general public can do. You have to have been shown by a vet or another specialist how to do that. My microscope, so when a hedgehog comes in, I can have a look and see what injuries they've got. But one of the main things that hedgehogs come in with is parasites. So these are things they pick up from the food that they eat. Now, the top things on a hedgehog's list of food in the wild are beetles and caterpillars. They're the two best things, and they don't contain any parasites. Pretty much everything else, so earthworms they will eat, they carry roundworm. They will eat slugs, and they carry lungworm and also fluke. Same with snails. Fluke is carried by those as well. And also they will eat other things like woodlice that they can carry the thorny head worm. So the best foods, beetles and caterpillars. I look at their poo under the microscope and I can work out what kind of parasites they have. Every hedgehog will have parasites. We can't stop them. They'll pick them up from the wild. But if a hedgehog is dehydrated or injured or it's starving, it can't get enough natural food, the parasites will start to take over. And one of the problems that we've got is that over the years, habitat loss in our gardens, hedgehogs can't get into enough gardens, and if they can get into the gardens, there aren't the right sorts of plants and things for them to find enough of those beetles and caterpillars. So over time, hedgehogs are just becoming a bit unhealthy. It's like you and me, if we always lived off pizza, we could last a few years, but we wouldn't be particularly healthy. So basically, I will have a look and see what parasites they have, and then I'll treat them. These is a nebulizer. This is for hedgehogs with breathing problems. And then this is my cupboard full of all sorts of other things, blankets, other medicated scrubs, a lot of baby equipment in here for baby hoglets as well. At the back we've got all sorts of different formulas for feeding the hedgehogs, which is amazing. A few people are asking about fleas, saying hedgehogs are covered in fleas. Most of the time hedgehogs aren't covered in fleas. It's actually quite rare. It tends to be the orphans or sick hedgehogs that tend to be covered in fleas, although I think it does vary quite a lot between different areas. Please never try and treat a hedgehog for its fleas. Pretty much all treatments for dogs or cats will kill hedgehogs, so please don't go around spraying anything on them. A hedgehog rescue will know treatments that will work, but really you don't need to be going around treating the hedgehogs in the garden. They live with the fleas. They're not going to do anything. The same with ticks. If you see a few ticks on a hedgehog, so that's the little white balls that you'll see sometimes around the ears and around the skirt of the hedgehogs. 1 or 2, maybe even 3, 4, 5, depending on the size of the hedgehog, is normal. If you're seeing more than that, so if you've got a hedgehog that's absolutely covered in ticks, it might be a sign that there's something else wrong with the hedgehog. So it's always worth contacting a hedgehog rescue. And again, it's a bit like with flea treatment and so on. If you try and remove ticks yourself in the wrong way, you can actually do more harm than good. If you remove them the wrong way, the tick can actually regurgitate its stomach contents into the hedgehog before you pull it off. So any nasties that it's carrying actually go into the hedgehog. So please, if you've got any concerns or worries, please try and ask a rescue first. Please don't attempt to do any of those things. A rescue will know the best treatments or be able to advise you on what you should be doing. So these are all the different care things, all the newspapers for lining all the hutches. I'll just have a look and see the questions that you've asked. I think a few people asking about hedgehog boxes and where to place them. We'll talk about those as we go out into the garden. I think I've missed a couple of questions. I thought, oh, I should answer those, and then I've started rambling on about something else. So I will go back through the questions if I've missed your question. But please do type away whilst I'm on the hospital side of things. Please, if there's any more questions about the rescue side, please do type away now, and I will try and answer them. But we will talk about the garden a little bit just before we go out there. So I'll just give you a few moments if there's any more hospital related questions. I think somebody was asking about the smallest hedgehog that I've had come in. I've actually seen newborn hedgehogs. I had to rescue a mum and babies that had been disturbed. Somebody was pulling up their decking and it disturbed a mum. If the hedgehogs are pink with white spines, you'll probably have never seen these, not even in pictures. They literally were a few hours old and they're the smallest. I relocated them to another spot and luckily I think mum reared several of the babies, but really should be trying to prevent people from disturbing hedgehogs at this time of year. Mealworms, really important. Everybody talking about food. So the only foods I would recommend feeding to hedgehogs: cat or kitten biscuits, any meaty cat or dog food. But as I say, at this time of year when it's hot, I just leave out biscuits. As long as you're leaving out plenty of water, that's absolutely fine. Please never mealworms, no peanuts, no sunflower hearts. All of those things, it's to do with the phosphorus calcium ratio in them. Basically, if you feed those things, they leach calcium out of bones. And so it can end up, basically it's like hedgehogs will end up with basically osteoporosis, really brittle, painful bones. And I've had some people that say to me, oh, but I only feed a sprinkle of mealworms, it's only a few. Well, the problem is that things like mealworms, it's like sweets to children. They're highly addictive, and the hedgehog will go from your garden to the next garden to the next garden, and the little tiny sprinkle that everyone's putting out soon becomes that hedgehog is eating nothing but mealworms. And if you've seen one with metabolic bone disease, which is what they get if they're eating nothing but the mealworms or the peanuts and the sunflower heart, if you've seen it, it's absolutely heartbreaking. It's so painful for them to walk. It's a bit like rickets. They cannot walk. It's incredibly painful, and it's sometimes virtually impossible to correct it. So it's much better to prevent it happening in the first place. A few people asking about what deficiencies lead to spines falling out. So there's a number of things that can lead to spine loss. So ringworm and also mange mites as well. So if we've got a hedgehog that comes in that's losing spines, I'd be trying to have a look at the spines under the microscope, seeing if there's any little bit of skin attached to it still. Can I see any mange mites on there? I'd also be looking for signs of ringworm as well. So that's often crusting around the nose and ears. Often mange is found at the same time as ringworm, so often I'll be treating them for both. A few people asking about Hedgehog Foods again. So just to remind you, fish flavour, really big myths around it. Absolutely no problem with fish. Fish derivatives are in pretty much every cat and dog food. So there's nothing wrong with fish. It's just that they probably won't like the fish flavour. So nothing wrong. You won't poison the hedgehogs if you give them salmon flavour dog food or salmon flavour cat food. They just probably won't eat it. They can be quite fussy, so absolutely no problem. Can you see me instead of my kitchen sink? Well, the problem is I have to hold a torch and talk and show you around, so to be honest, I'll probably be no more exciting than the kitchen sink, to be honest. If you want to see me, you can go back to the beginning of the video and there's a little bit of me, but I'm not sure that I'm that exciting. So what we're going to do now is head down. So as I say, my hospital is basically a garage that's attached to the side of my house. It's just a normal extended semi-detached. So this is the passage that goes from the hospital down to the garden. So I'll just tell you a little bit before we go out there. I'm just seeing how dark it is. It's pretty dark. So we're going to go outdoors into the wildlife garden. So just to tell you a little bit, we will do a little bit of a tour around and see if we can see anybody at the feeding stations. If we can't, then I'll just give you a bit more of a talk about the wildlife garden and what we've got out there. We'll have a little look in the pond. Sometimes we can see frog spawn and newts out there. So we might be able to see, well, not frog spawn, but we'll see tadpoles now, maybe some newts. Before we go out, just a little thing about lights. So I've got patio lights, but most of the time I will have them off. Now, hedgehogs, they don't like change. So if one night you have your patio lights off, then the next night you have them on, then the next night you have them off, hedgehogs won't probably come close to the house because they hate change. If you always have your lights on, or if you almost have your lights off, they will get used to it. So I have had hedgehogs that when I used to have the patio lights on a lot, they would get quite used to it and they'd come right up to the patio doors. So it's just important to be consistent in whatever you do. I've got a couple of feeding stations around the garden when we go out and have a look. I'd always recommend that. Hedgehogs aren't territorial, but they do get to like particular feeding stations. They will start to fight over food, and particularly in areas where there are lots of hedgehogs but maybe the habitat isn't great, they will fight more over resources. So if you have several different feeding stations, you just reduce the risk of the hedgehogs fighting each other too much. And unfortunately that is back down to habitat loss. There isn't enough natural food out there. I've tried to make my garden as wildlife friendly as possible, lots of natural food places, and as you see when we go around, you'll see that there's lots of ground cover, virtually every single bit of my garden. You don't see much soil, it's all plants, and that's what you should try and recreate in your garden. Basically, if there's no plants, there's nothing for insects to eat, and if there's no insects, there's nothing for hedgehogs to eat, and unfortunately we can't sustain hedgehog population just by artificial feeding. We need to be creating natural habitats, lots of gardens that they can get into, and I'll try and show you the hedgehog holes I've got. First thing is to make sure hedgehogs can actually get into your garden and into your neighbour's garden. So I'll be a little bit quieter as we go outside, but we'll go and have a look at the feeding station, see if we see anything. We may do, we may not. If we don't, as I say, I'll give you a bit more of a general talk. And then I've seen that we've got a lot of different questions coming in, some of which I haven't had a chance to answer, and it gets more difficult when we're outside and I'm trying to be quiet. So I will come back and go over all your questions. So here we go outside. So we're on the patio here. As I say, I've got a couple of feeding stations in the garden. This is the first feeding station. As you see, it's right next to my patio doors. This is actually a hedgehog house, but you can use a hedgehog house as a feeding station. So you just see it's just a wooden hedgehog house. The main thing is you don't put bedding and food in the same box. So you always have separate boxes for bedding and separate boxes for feeding. So this, inside that, there's just, it's lined with newspaper that I change every day. Really important that you keep them hygienic, the same as you would do with any bird feeders. So I change the newspaper in there every day, and I've just got a bowl of cat biscuits in there. And then nearby, my shallow bowl of water. This is about 1.5 inches deep. I wouldn't go much higher than that because little hedgehogs won't be able to get into it, but if you go much shallower, it just evaporates really quickly. So this is a really, really nice one, mosaic one. But you can, any terracotta plant base, they're about £3 just for a plain one. As I say, about 1.5 inches deep. Somebody's saying they're worried about attracting rats. You won't attract rats by feeding hedgehogs. If you're seeing lots of rats, it will be that there's another problem in the area. So probably somebody's leaving out chicken carcasses or something, or it's something to do with the drainage. So I don't think you'll cause a problem with rats by feeding hedgehogs. However, if you start seeing loads and loads of rats around, I mean, the rats are everywhere, so seeing the odd one maybe every so often it isn't a problem. But if you start seeing loads of rats, then there's probably another cause for the rat problem. And yes, you do need to stop feeding the hedgehogs at that point. I can hear something. Can you see all this cover? You can see it's difficult to see hedgehogs in my garden because look, all this cover. This is mainly geraniums, but I've also got some sedums. Also, this is blue alkanet. It just grows wild in the garden. I can hear a hedgehog already, but I can't see where it is because of all the geraniums. But I can hear it snuffling around. Can you hear it? Oh, can you see the plant shaking over here? It's in here. It's frozen because it can hear us, but it's definitely in there. We'll just stand back a bit. We'll see if we see anything. So say hedgehogs, they've not got brilliant eyesight, being nocturnal, and they can actually survive okay even with one eye in the wild, but they have got brilliant hearing and a brilliant sense of smell. So that hedgehog, before he's seen me, he's already heard me and he's probably smelt me. So I'll just give a moment, just see if we see anything. Otherwise we'll move around and we'll come back here later. But can you see, this is a wonderful hedgehog habitat. Even if we don't see one, well, that's good, because all this area, so this is providing all this for insects, homes for insects, hidey holes for insects, but also hedgehogs, mating hedgehogs. They'll do that in the flower beds. I'll come down in the morning and I'll see areas that have been trampled. This is where I can hear him moving along. Hope it's not too boring for you if we don't see one, but I can hear him moving along. Can you see the flat? Can you see moving back here? Here he is. Can you see him? Can you see him there? There he is. So he has heard me now. They'll either stand still or they'll curl up into a ball. Obviously now he knows I'm there, especially with the torch. So we'll leave him be and we'll go and see if there's anything happening in the feeding station. But just to show you again, look at all this cover. The worst thing for wildlife actually is grass. It has very little value, but if you let it grow with all the daisies and all the wildflowers in it, you can create a wonderful habitat. So somebody's saying it's so funny to see the grass move. Yes, here, so say, because there's so much cover, often you'll just see the little shaking. We'll come back and see if we see anything down there. I'm just going to take you down to the feeding station and see if there's anything down here. This is the pond, and we'll come back to this in a bit as well. But there's all this area. This is my woodland area. I call it my woodland area, but see where all these ferns are growing. And again, this is all wonderful foraging habitat. Really important at the moment. It literally is a drought out there, so as much water as you can provide. So this is my second feeding station. Another bowl of water. And this is the feeding station that some of you will have seen that I built the other day. So we've got nobody here at the moment. Another bowl of water there. So probably that hedgehog, he might have been heading to the top feeding station, or he might have been coming down for this one. So nobody at this one yet. That's my night camera. A few people have asked me questions about what night camera. This is an Aussie trail hunting camera. It's just a cheap one, less than £50 on Amazon. They're pretty much all made by the same company, I think, unless you go for a Bushnell, about a £200 one. It's just a basic one from Amazon, so wonderful to be able to monitor the hedgehogs. This is my wild area, so I let the grass grow long in here. So hedgehogs, for their nests, they'll just tear off mouthfuls of leaves, of grass as well, mouthfuls of leaves and grass to add to their nest. So if you let the grass grow long, and also this is just full of wildflowers again for the hedgehogs to forage through, but also frogs will also forage through there, so that's amazing. So nobody in the feeding station, but someone has been, because look, they've moved the internal partition, so someone has tried to get in there tonight. We've just missed them. They've already come for their dinner early. I'll just show you. Someone was talking about hedgehog boxes and where to place them. So the best thing to do is to put them in the undergrowth, so you could have any underneath these areas, so as natural as possible. If you think about hedgehogs, as the name suggests, they live in hedgerows. So putting your hedgehog box in as much cover as possible, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, but always face the entrance away from the garden, so into the hedge, and that basically helps make it a bit safer from predators, and also stops the rain getting in as well. So I'd be tucking a hedgehog box right back in, see somewhere in there, some nice leafy areas. I'd be putting it under there. I've put these two, see I've got this building that's it's basically a wooden structure with concrete. Some of the hedgehog boxes, because of all that, you know, we had that awful winter, so wet. A lot of my hedgehog boxes actually got soaked through, even though they were underneath plants. So I've got these two boxes here that are on the concrete and undercover. Now, this one here regularly has a visitor in there. That's a family-sized one. I've never had one of these before, but I bought that one this year. Family-sized hedgehog box, and there's regularly one staying in there. Now, people often say, well, oh, I've seen a hedgehog and I know it's been in the box for a couple of days and then it's disappeared. They don't stay in the same box forever. So quite often this one will have somebody in for a couple of days and then they'll go away again and they'll come back again. Unless it's a nesting mum who may be in there while she raises her babies, males will literally come and go. So they might come and stay for a couple of nights, a bit like an Airbnb. They'll stay for a couple of nights, then they'll go off somewhere else looking for females. They might stay away for a few nights, then they might come back for a few nights, then they'll disappear off. But the best chance of attracting a resident, a nice sturdy box, if you can, always go for a wooden box with a nice felt roof, really sturdy. They'll provide the best protection against the elements. I know lots of people have seen the ones that you can get that are basically just like a little rattan one that don't provide enough protection, I would say, against the elements, and also the wire that goes around them. There's some evidence that hedgehogs can get trapped in them, so do be careful. If you can afford one, I do always go for a nice wooden one. Just going to see if anybody else has come up to the feeding station. Don't think they have, so we'll go and take a little look in the pond, see what we can see, and then we'll go back down and see if there's any more activity in the garden. Does that sound good? I'll try and have a look at questions. How far apart would you space the houses? It's less about the spacing of the houses and more about what other opportunities are there for hedgehogs to to find natural nests in your area. So I find in this area my neighbours have all got sheds that hedgehogs can get under, and hedgehogs will often choose to nest under a shed if they can. So I know that there's lots of kind of natural places. I've got ivy that swoops down over the fences and provides a nice cover at the bottom. So I think they'll probably nest in those natural locations. So they tend to prefer those unless the hedgehog houses. But there are other people, if you have a think about your garden, maybe there's less natural cover, and sometimes people will have 5 in a row and they'll all be occupied. So it really does depend really what natural cover you've got. Obviously you should try and aim for something like mine where there's loads of natural cover. But if you can't, or whilst you're growing that, because obviously it takes time for things to start growing, whilst you're doing that, we've just seen some plants move. Let's go and have a look. Can you see? So we'll let him get on with his foraging. Now that hedgehog that we've just seen, I'm pretty sure that that's the hedgehog. So if you know, did you notice that he had some white marks on his back? A lot of people ask me about this. They pick up hedgehogs on the night camera and they ask me what the markings on, and that was just mud on him. But sometimes people do mark hedgehogs. I don't advise it, and certainly if you were going to do it, I wouldn't be putting big white marks on like that. We wonder whether that might attract predators to them. But that just looked like some mud that had dried on his back, and actually I've been watching that hedgehog for a while coming to the feeding station. I think he's the one that's been living in that big family size box. That's where I see him coming from. And so I see him come out. He comes back about 3 or 4 times a night. I'm sure it's a male. Just looking, you can't tell from the size, but I can tell from his behaviour. So he's the one that quite often barges the others out of the way. So a combination of that activity. People often ask me, how do they know if it's a male or female? And really there is no way of telling. You get small male hedgehogs, you get big female hedgehogs, so you can't tell by the size. There's no other distinguishing features. The only way you can tell at this time of year, if you're hearing a noise in the garden, so that will be mating hedgehogs, and basically the male will circle the female and she huffs back at him. So if you're the one that is being circled is the female, and the one that is doing the circling is the male, and the one that's making the noise, the huffing sound, is the female. I'm just seeing, I can hear him wandering around in there. See, to the hedgehog, under all that cover, it's just really nice and dark in there, like in a hedgerow. So he's quite happy snuffing around, even though I'm here. To be honest, he doesn't even notice because, as I say, to him, it's really, really dark in there. Just his normal habitat. I think he might even have gone behind my composter. This is a beehive composter here. I don't keep bees, it's just the shape of a beehive. I think he's gone round the back of there, snuffling around in there. We'll see what else we can see, but wasn't that amazing to see him? I think there's a hole through to next door there as well. Yes, can you see? Right down the bottom. Down there, there's a hole that goes through to next door, so I think he may have gone through there. Just talking about hedgehog holes, I'll show you some of them. I don't know if we'll be able to see them because of all the ground cover, but there's a hedgehog hole through to next door. You probably can't see in the dark, but there's one Oh, another hedgehog. That's a different hedgehog. Did you see it? Gosh, that was a big one as well. So that's the second hedgehog. There's 2 hedgehogs out tonight. He's gone right to the back and possibly gone through. There's another hole through there as well. I'll start looking back. I've been focusing on the hedgehog, so just going to have a look. It will stay. Yes, people are asking about the video. If you lose connection, the video will stay on the Facebook page. So as I say, if I don't get to your question, then if you just keep commenting, and I'll go back through tonight, and anything that I didn't answer in my talking, I'll come back through and answer your questions. So I'll just have a little look now. If there are things that I haven't answered yet, please repeat your question now. I've got a moment, and I'll try and answer them, whilst also looking for hedgehogs. I probably need an assistant, don't I? With it just being me, it's quite hard to film and to talk and to hold a torch at the same time. But hopefully I got good enough footage of you to see those 2 hedgehogs that are visiting. So say they're coming down, going to this feeding station. I can hear another one over here. I think that's the big male back again. Isn't it exciting just hearing the noise of them rummaging around? I can hear him, but he's on the other side of the fence. So you can hear the noise, but he's rummaging. He's on the other side, so he's in next door's garden, I think. So again, really important, hedgehogs need to be able to access about 20 to 30 big gardens to be able to find enough food, and also to be able to find enough mates. So you need to make sure that you're providing access on all sides of your garden. My mum's joined. Somebody is saying, I think, do cats attack hedgehogs? No, cats will only attack maybe if it's a nest that's been abandoned. With tiny baby orphans, sometimes a cat might attack. Much bigger risk with dogs. I'm getting over the years more and more dog attacks. I guess because people, don't get me wrong, I love dogs and I love dog lovers, so I don't want to say anything bad about dogs, but I think what happens is people don't realise they have hedgehogs. They let the dog out at night, so you can imagine dog just wanders around here, and obviously dogs do what dogs do. Many of them are trained, it's in their blood to catch rabbits and so on, and they will just attack anything, including hedgehogs. And sadly, people often think that it's the dog that's ended up worst off, but sadly, often the hedgehog has got puncture wounds that will then get infected, obviously because of the bacteria from the dog's mouth. So cats not a problem. Rats will attack baby hedgehogs, but again, generally only if they've already been orphaned, so not always a problem, but dogs will cause a major issue. I'm just going to show you some of the hedgehog holes. I don't think we're going to see anyone in the feeding stations because I think they've all either gone up to the other side. So this is further down the garden, and I've got a hedgehog hole under there. Can you see where I'm shining the torch? That goes through to next door, although some smaller ones can get through the slats. It's just a slatted fence. If you have a think, that's one of the reasons for hedgehog decline. Well, back in the 1950s, probably people didn't even have. So in the 1950s, there were about 30 odd million hedgehogs. Now there's less than 1 million left in the UK. And if you have a think, in the 1950s, we probably didn't even have fences, did we, to our neighbours? And if we did, it was probably like a little picket fence. A hedgehog could have trundled its way through. But now we've put up really huge fences. We've put concrete at the base, we've decked over our gardens, we've put artificial grass down, we've paved over everything, ripped out. So look at this, this is probably what a 1950s garden looked like. Pretty wild, little bit of an allotment, lots of grass, but we've paved all over it, and now just hedgehogs can't find enough food. We're not growing the right things for the hedgehogs, so you need to be able to make sure that hedgehogs can actually get into your garden. So there's another route. Do you know, the other day I was so excited because they've created a new route through. Can you see here? I found this the other day. This goes through to the back garden, and they've dug their way through. So there's basically a tunnel under the ivy. That's what hedgehogs are coming in through there. I've heard them the other night coming in. There are other accesses, and down here, look. So rather than put all the stuff in my green bin, this is a whole load of ivy and basic cuttings and all sorts of stuff. Lovely and dry down here. I just let it pile up. I mean, you don't see it. I don't see it. So if you're worried about things looking messy. Well, first of all, you should learn to love mess, because it's better for hedgehogs for it to be wild, better for all wildlife. But look, you can just create this wonderful nature corridor through the back. The hedgehogs can get over and behind the back of next door's shed. And ideally, if hedgehogs could get under my shed, they would probably nest under there, but it's not quite high enough. And that's something to mention. I know during lockdown, there's probably loads of you who are thinking, oh, I should have done that shed project, but I couldn't get anyone, couldn't buy the shed, couldn't get to B&Q to buy the shed. Please don't suddenly this summer start ripping down all your sheds and tearing up all your decking, because that's exactly where those mums and babies will be living. And if you disturb them, if you decide to take down your old shed where mum is nesting, mum might run off, or she might abandon the babies, she might eat the babies. Trying to hand rear tiny babies only a few days old is virtually impossible. So please, that's one of the greatest risks I think of lockdown, is that everyone's going to be saving their DIY in the garden for the absolute worst time. Please try excuse me, oh, I haven't got the virus, I'm just coughing. So people will be leaving all their stuff, I think, until the summer, but really you should be trying to do it at in September, October time. Just gonna try and go back up here and have another little look around, but just seeing seeing if there's any questions. I know I've missed quite a few, so I promise I'll come back and have a look. If it's not tonight, then I will do it tomorrow. So I'll just have another little look around. I mainly listen though as well. See if I can hear any plants moving. We'll have a little look in the pond before we go back as well. Let's have a look and see if we can see anything. So in this pond I get frogs. Can you see tadpoles? See all the tadpoles in there? It's very therapeutic coming and sitting here and just watching all the little tadpoles. Some of them are just starting to get their legs. I can see a newt over the other side, but I don't know if you can see it. It's right where I'm shining my torch. Right there, I can see its little legs. I think it might be facing the other way from us. So I doubt maybe you probably can't see it. I'll probably just shun my torch and you probably... Oh, there's another one as well. There's a newt on the log. Can you see him? Don't know if you can. So there's a lily pad there, and then just to the left, sat on the log, there's a newt. Sadly, they probably are waiting to eat tadpoles, but I've got absolutely loads of tadpoles, so... Oh, can you see the newt just moved? You might have to watch this back later. But he's literally... Oh, can you see him? So he's basically hanging off the log. I don't want to go too close because I might fall into the pond. But hopefully you can see him. There he goes. Just swimming off. So I've got absolutely loads of newts, probably 20 or 30 odd newts in here. This pond level's really low, so actually I'm going to need to come back and top this up, because I'm going to looking at this, I'm getting a bit worried about the levels in here. And that's also in terms of hedgehogs. If a hedgehog was to fall in, oh, it's saying rotate my photos. I've got lots of escape routes, so all of these plants that you see, these are all on baskets. And the hedgehogs could basically just clamber out into the baskets and out. Really important that you have several escape routes. But yeah, just looking at this, can you see how low the pond level is? So you can't just top up with tap water when you've got all the wildlife in there. You need to use a special chemical that will take out all the chlorine. So I need to get some special pond stuff, and then I can top up the levels again. But yeah, looking at that, that's very low, and that just shows what a drought we've got. I mean, hedgehogs, I say, they're coming in such a bad way, but not helped by dehydration. And I'm trying, every single person that's bringing me a poorly hedgehog, I'm trying to say, can you leave out, please, several bowls of water? Can you leave them out on the street? Can you tell all your friends and all your neighbours, if you do nothing else after today, just build a hedgehog highway. So literally just cut a hole in your fence to make sure hedgehogs can get in, but also just out bowl of water to say, if you don't have, you might not have a garden, so please then tell a friend, tell a neighbour, tell a family member, please just ask them if they do nothing else for wildlife. It's just so important. If you can imagine this time of year, normally we'd have had April showers and these would be full. This is the lowest I've ever just seeing. Can you see the newts come back onto the, put it on the log. A few people ask me how I keep my pond clear, and I put barley straw in here, keeps it nice and clear. Always. Yeah. Somebody's asking me, how do I know for sure that a hedgehog is visiting? You can look for hedgehog poo. That's one of the key signs. You can build a feeding station, and you can put some plain paper and a non-toxic ink pad in the entrance and see if you capture hedgehog footprints. A night camera obviously is the best way. That's the best way of telling. But yeah, looking around for hedgehog poo is another way. I've got on my website, so if you go to littlesilverhedgehog.com, there's various sections that you might find useful. So there's a hedgehog information and wildlife gardening section. That's where you'll find everything, much more detail. So I've got blogs on how to build a station, how to build a house, how to site your hedgehog house. So I've got a video on how to do that, what plants to grow for hedgehogs. So talking through some of the plants in my garden, how to create a wildlife pond as well, and to make it hedgehog safe and hedgehog friendly. There's also on that website a blog as well, so that's where I put some one-off things, so things like how to create your own compost, how to divide your plants. I've also got some tips that are specifically for spring or for summer or for autumn and for hedgehogs as well, so it's well worth a look on there. And that's also where you'll find the support us pages. So if you found this information useful, please do share it with friends and family. I will be running several of these during lockdown, so and also the video stays on the site forever, so you can send the link to friends and family, neighbours, anyone that you think would find it useful. But say do have a look at the website as well, because it's got much more detailed information than I can possibly talk about. I'm just going to listen out, but I don't think I can hear anything. So we've probably had our chance for hedgehogs. In my garden, they tend to visit, which is why I scheduled this in. They tend to visit between about 9:30 and 10:30, and then there's another flurry of activity between about 4 and 5 in the morning. So often when the birdsong and the dawn chorus, I can see from the night camera there's also hedgehog activity as well. So I get 2 different lots. Are there any plants that are poisonous to hedgehogs? Not that I know about, but basically when plants you want to be thinking about, well, hedging, natural plants, ones with kind of medium-sized leaves, but also ones that are native, so thinking about oak leaves are really, really good. Oak and beech are brilliant for hedgehogs for their, they can take into their winter nests. Also, just anything that provides ground cover. So I love geraniums because look how big they grow. So my garden is, at this time of year, is mainly geraniums, and literally I probably started with about 5 geraniums. I just divide them every spring, so literally it hasn't cost me a penny. I just divide them and they create more for free. So it's really easy. You can go, garden centres are back open now, so you can literally go and buy a few big geraniums, divide them as soon as you buy them, plant them now, and you should get ground cover pretty quickly. And really, if you've got things already thriving in your garden, just multiply them. You can spend a fortune going out and buying all sorts of plants that might live a year in your garden and then they'll die. I would just, if something's already thriving, just make more of it. Go with that. Create a little bit of variety, but just go with the things that seem to thrive in your garden. I don't think we're going to see anything else. I think probably they've been scared off, but we've seen 2 hedgehogs, so I'm so excited. I hope that's really good. I know lots of people are getting up early in the morning. I know I've probably missed about 1 million questions, so just going to give you a quick scan of the garden at night so you can see. Say I've got lots of little solar lights as well. Just gives a little bit of night atmosphere, but also just scanning around. But yes, I don't think anyone's going to come to the feeding station, so we'll say over and out. For those of you who want to hang out with me more, we'll go back into the hospital and just see if anyone else. So whilst we've been out in the garden, it's possible that some of the hedgehogs in the hospital have decided to come out for their tea, so I will, if any of you who can stay with me a little bit longer, we will go back into the hospital. But otherwise, that's the end of the garden tour. I promise I will go over and look at your questions, the ones that I've missed. I know lots of you have answered each other's questions as well, which is brilliant. I'm so pleased we got to see some hedgehogs for you. Obviously, I never know whether we're going to see any, so they obviously knew. They've obviously knew it was a special night and wanted to come out for you, so that's amazing. So night to anyone that's leaving me now. Thank you so much for joining, and please do check out the website. For those of you who are staying, we're just going to go back into the hospital, and we'll probably be about another 5 minutes in here. I can already hear some noise for those of you who are still staying. So I'm going to be very quiet to maximise the chances of you seeing something. I'm going to turn the light off as well. some activity, so I know that there's some out. Can you hear the noise? Somebody's trying to get out. I think it's probably George. So the boys get restless in captivity. You don't want to keep them too long. He's nearly finished his treatment and he needs to go. Can you hear him? I think he's climbing the bars of the cage. So he needs to go soon. Can you also hear the one with the breathing problems? There she is. That's Lilac. Look, here's George. George looking guilty. No, George. George knows that he's being naughty. So as I say, George is doing quite a bit of climbing. He's still being treated for fluke, and that can make them hyperactive. But also males, obviously this time of year they would be mating with the females, so they can get quite restless in captivity. So we do need to make sure that we don't keep hedgehogs too long. He's got another fluke treatment and then he can go back to the wild. But let's have a look. Naughty George. So yes, hedgehogs do make a noise as they snuffle along, but you can, as I know several of you are commenting about her breathing. So she's got lungworm, so basically anything in the lungs can cause breathing problems, and it can also develop into pneumonia. So she's being treated with an antibiotic and also with parasite medications to clear the parasites out of her lungs. Oh yes, someone's saying he can smell the next door neighbour. Yes, that is the problem. The hedgehogs, obviously, they make quite a bit of noise and they can disrupt the other hedgehogs. So yes, they can hear each other and smell each other, so it must be very difficult for the males. Really, really important. I know it looks really cute in here, but this is a very stressful environment. It's why it's really better to show you them at night, because at least that's their normal time when they would be out and doing things. But it is a stressful environment for them. You can just see, this is Penny, just see her bottom. So she's obviously been out feeding, but she's gone back into bed now. I think Lilac will be okay. She's eating okay and she's putting on weight. We just need to basically clear her nostrils. And she's also getting treatments, as you probably saw the other day, in the nebulizer. Can you see Fred? So Fred's still in bed. Can you see him? Fred escaped yesterday, so he's pretty much ready to go. I said the one with the wound on his head that's all healed now. I don't know if you can see him, his head in bed. Anyway, I think that's enough of the ones here. That's probably all we're going to see. So I will leave you. I'm just going to go and make sure that that I've given them the right food. Each hedgehog, some of them have different preferences, and I just want them to get nice and big and healthy in here. So I need to just make sure that they've all had their proper meals for the evening, that everyone's okay, that everyone's locked in. I will do an extra special check. These are the latches on the hutches, but I must have left one slightly open, or sometimes they can actually reach round. I've been known for some of the hedgehogs to actually reach around and undo those, clever hedgehogs. So we need to make sure that all those are shut so that we don't have any escape hogs overnight. I'm going to check on the one with the abscess as well. It's probably getting quite late, so I'll just have a quick check of your questions and then I shall finish. Does feeding hedgehogs make them less able to fend for themselves? No, there's no evidence at all that they become reliant on it. It's just like you would feed the birds. It's just a supplementary extra. As I say, without that, they might eat too many of the foods that contain parasites. Really what you're trying to do is make up for the fact that we've destroyed some of their habitat and they're not able to find the foods that are the best for them. I mean, really, we could do with having a lot less houses and bigger gardens and fewer roads and lots more hedges and all sorts, but until we get to that point again, we're just giving them a little bit of a helping hand. And it's really important, if you do nothing else, leave out some shallow dishes of water. If you're worried about feeding, so that there aren't any problems with it, they won't become reliant, but if you're worried, just leave out some water. As I say, even that can be such a lifesaver. So please, if that's the only thing you do after having watched the video. So I think that's everything. I'm just going to check. We need a name for the new arrival with the abscess, although he's looking very poorly and sorry for himself, poor chap. So I'll come back and see how he's doing in a bit. He looks like he's fast asleep in there. So thank you so much, everybody. I know some people have already left. Some people need to leave soon. I will go back now through all your questions. So thank you so much for joining me. I will do another one of these, probably in daytime around the garden again. But do have a look on the website, as I say, littlesilverhedgehog.com. All sorts of blogs and information. Probably every question that you've asked, there's probably a detailed blog on it. So please have a look through there. If you find that I've not answered your question, sometimes the comments do get a little bit lost. Then I'll do a post in the morning and just say if I didn't answer your question, please come back. So thank you, everyone. It's been so good to share the evening with you. So I'm looking forward to being able to run my evening events and open houses again for real in the future. But it's brilliant that so many more of you who wouldn't be able to come locally have been able to come tonight. So thank you so much. I will say good night and I'll go and have a look at your questions. So take care. Sleep tight, everyone. Go and top up your hedgehog feeding stations, put all that water out, and I will see you again soon. Lots of love, everyone. Bye.